Hello and welcome to this guide to passing the Functional Skills English Level 2 Writing Exam. This is an Oak Tree English video. Okay, so this one is specifically geared towards the Pearson Edexcel paper, but the advice will be useful for anyone taking this qualification. On the front of your sheet, you'll see some fun things to fill in. And these are things you can do before the exam proper starts. Please note, you must not use a dictionary. Also note that when you sign this paper, it's a little bit like doing a slightly lower level signing of the Official Secrets Act. You're signing that you're not allowed to tell anyone about it outside. But as soon as you get your paper, you can put in your surname and your other first names and your centre number and your candidate number, which will be on a card in front of you on the table. Please make sure you have with you black pens. I'll talk about that on the next slide. Here we go. Here's the next slide. So also on the front sheet, you'll see some instructions. And while you're waiting for the exam to kick off, take some time to read through these instructions. They're written by professionals. It'll help you to read through them. So use a black ink or ballpoint pen. Make sure you're taking in with you a black pen, probably 2 or 3 black pens to make sure that they work. This is an exam. Let's take it seriously. Fill in the boxes as we mentioned on the last slide, and don't forget to sign the declaration, the Official Secrets Act, or slightly less official Secrets Act. And there is in the paper an answer space for you to complete the tasks. Use it. Tell me if this is getting complicated. Okay. It tells you the total marks for the paper, in this case 36. Notice task 1 is weighted heavier than task 2. So you should spend more time on task 1 than on task 2. It also tells you what you will be assessed on, in this case spelling, punctuation and grammar in both tasks. By the way, that's not the only thing that you get marked on, but more about that later. It gives you some advice. Please read each task carefully. Is it too obvious to say read the question? It seems so obvious, but I want to take this opportunity. Please make sure you read the question on the exam paper. Aim to spend about 35 minutes on task 1 and about 25 minutes on task 2. Do you see what's happening here? Task 1 is weighted heavier, spend more time. And also notice what the advice it's giving you. Plan your work before you start and check it when you finish. More about that in a moment. Can I suggest as we go through this that you have a practice paper handy? Your teacher should have given you about 200,364 practice papers to go through. Have one of them handy so that you can see what I'm talking about when we analyze these questions. First, let's talk about vital statistics, and I give a shout out to anybody who knows who the character on the screen is. How many questions are there? That's right, there are 2 questions. This is an hour-long exam with 2 questions. Surely this is the easiest thing that you've ever done. I mean, 3 questions if you count what is your name. How many of these should you answer? Well, I don't want to be too obvious here, but both of them. You have writing 2 pieces of work. And how much time do you have? Well, as we said before, it's 60 minutes. And as we said before, you should spend 35 minutes on the heavier weighted task 1, and 25 minutes on task 2. I would suggest 5 minutes of each of those, about 5 minutes, maximum of 5 minutes of each of those times on planning. Oh, I should have mentioned something about planning. If only the next slide were about planning. Oh, look! Okay, so when you go into your exam, you really want to have something to plan. And you have got notes here. Don't write notes on your hand. Don't do that. You will be thrown out and disqualified. Don't do that. But you have notes in the form of your hand. What are you talking about, Tim? Well, give me 5. You have your thumb represents an introduction. You have 3 points for your main body and 1 for your conclusion. 5 paragraphs. 5 paragraphs, and you have it all laid out for you in on your hand. Another way to remember this is tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you've told them. Now, you can plan this any way that you are comfortable with. This is your work. I would suggest that bullet points might be a good way to do it. Perhaps a mind map or an essay map. So a mind map is where you put the subject in the middle and you draw lots of spiky things around it and you talk about the things that you're going to talk about, and then you whittle them down to points 1, 2, 3. In your introduction, use it like a roadmap for yourself. So in your introduction, you should be saying, this is a report about, or this is an article about, or I am writing to you to complain, or whatever. State the purpose of your writing in your introduction, and then say, I am going to talk about point 1, point 2, point 3, whatever that might be. Say it's litter in your local area. So in point 1, you're going to talk about the type of litter there is. Well, there's an awful lot of crisp packets and chip wrappers, and it's McDonald's. McDonald's is very bad. I'm getting angry already. I boycott McDonald's on grammatical grounds. I'm loving it, honestly. A stative verb in the present continuous tense, absolutely disgusting. I may not have been wholly serious, and I am not telling you to boycott McDonald's in case any representatives from McDonald's are watching and about to sue me. But I digress. So litter in your local area, you're saying you're going to talk about what your points 1, 2, or 3 are, what the rubbish is. Excuse me. Then point 2, what the effect of that litter is. Dogs are getting their noses caught in beer things, or the hedgehogs are eating the leftover chips. I don't know. Point 3 would be really what is already being done about it. Maybe so I have formed a community action group, but we can't do it all, so please send the council round. Your conclusion is why you have written and what you hope to achieve. So you're going back over the introduction. So I have told you that the litter is this. I have told you that the litter is that. I have mentioned that we are doing this. Now I want you to send the council round. Yeah. So this is for whatever question you get. Plan like this. You've got 3 points. Very often they will tell you what 3 points they want you to write about. At which point you just write about what they've told you to write about. Remember, you're not being tested on your ability to think creatively. You're being tested on your ability to communicate ideas. So there is the planning. But I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, well, how does all this get marked? I'm glad you asked. You see, there is a mark scheme. You are marked on composition and SPaG. We'll look at those in more detail in a moment, but let's have a look at the actual mark scheme. So this is actually from the mark scheme. This is what an examiner would look at to mark your thing. So communicates information, ideas and opinions clearly, using detail effectively for purpose and audience to an appropriate length. That means do what it says on the tin. Write an actual answer to the actual question. Communicate clearly. Uses appropriate format and structure for audience and purpose with effective use of paragraphs. We will talk more about format and structure in a little while, and also audience and purpose. But it's asking, if it's a letter, is it laid out like a letter? If it's an article, does it have headings, subheadings? Does it have the emotive language that you would expect? If it's a report, does it have a numbered structure? How is it numbered? How is it structured? Does it look like a report? Does it look like an article? Does it look like a letter or an email? Uses a range of sentences, including complex sentences, with consistent accuracy. Sentences we will talk about in just a moment. However, a range of sentences, have you got complex sentences? Have you got compound sentences? Have you got simple sentences? Are you sure? Do you know what those things mean? Don't worry, I got you back. We're getting there. Uses a wide range of vocabulary and consistently appropriate task. Please don't write in your exam the way you chat to your mates down the pub. If you're writing a report, please don't use any swear words. If you're writing something formal like a letter to Her Majesty the Queen, God bless her, please don't use slang. She doesn't need to hear slang. So use a wide range of vocabulary. Now, English has more words than any other language in the world. We are an incredibly rich language, and therefore we can say the same thing in loads of different ways. Try not to use the same word more than once. When I say the same word, I'm talking about an information-rich word, rather than words like and but. Obviously, you can use those multiple times. So on to SPaG. SPaG is spelling, punctuation and grammar, and you are marked on correct use of grammar. For example, subject-verb agreement, consistent use of different tenses, definite and indefinite articles with occasional lapses. Articles are really easy in English. In German, they've got like 16 articles. Of course, in Russian, they don't have any articles at all, but that's another story. The definite and indefinite articles are a and the. The is definite, a is indefinite, and you need to know when to use them. If you are an international student, a non-native speaker, then this is something perhaps that you might find difficult. The rest of us, this will come naturally. Now, correct use of punctuation. For example, full stops, question marks, exclamation marks, commas, possessive apostrophes, with occasional lapses. I sounded a bit like Brian Blessed with that bit. Possessive apostrophes are overused or underused depending on where you are. There's two uses for apostrophes, which we'll talk about when we get onto SPaG. And of course, spelling of words is used most often in work, study and daily life, including specialist words, is accurate, with occasional lapses. Okay, so you're expected to be able to spell common words. If you are throwing in words like transubstantiation, you will be forgiven for not spelling it completely correct, because it's not a high frequency word, it's an extraordinarily low frequency word. Some of you may even never have heard of that word, in which case you really don't need to worry about it. It's just not worth worrying about. Okay, any questions? Oh, good. Let's move on then and talk about those things in more detail. Ah, yes, you thought I was going to leave you high and dry. I'm not going to do that to you. So when it's talking about sentences, you're going to be marked on sentences. A sentence in English must have two things. It must have a subject and a verb. A subject is the person who does the verb, and the verb is the thing that is done. Probably an easier way to put that. So, shortest verse in the Bible, Jesus wept. It's in the Gospel of John. I leave you to look that up. It's a complete sentence. We have a subject, in this case Jesus. We have a verb, a finite verb, that is a verb in a tense, which is wept, the past tense of to weep. It's two words, it's a complete sentence. Short sentence, I am. Short sentence, but completely acceptable. However, I have seen far too many sentences which do not have a subject and a verb. Don't do that. Just don't do that. It makes everyone very sad. It actually makes me want to cry a little bit. So please don't leave a subject or a verb out of your sentences. So what about a paragraph? Now, a paragraph here works very similar to your essay plan. So you're going to be writing 5 paragraphs: introduction, point 1, point 2, point 3, conclusion. You can do the same thing with your paragraphs. A paragraph is a collection of sentences. It is not just one sentence. That's really important. A paragraph is more than one sentence. Aim for 5 sentences per paragraph. They should, because your paragraph, just like everything else in life, including life itself, needs to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. So your beginning of your paragraph is your topic sentence, what that paragraph is about. Your reader should know from reading your first sentence what that paragraph is about. You then provide evidence and explanation, a bit more detail in the next 3 sentences, and your final sentence should link in to your next paragraph. It should link the topic sentence to the next topic. And at the end, and in the end, I must press go upon this PowerPoint. Okay, so you must proofread your work. This means that you read back over what you have written and you find any mistakes that are obvious and that stand out. Read it as if it were aloud. Don't actually read it aloud, because you will disturb all of the other candidates and the examiner will variously ask you to leave or slap you around the back of the head, depending on their level of violence. They won't slap you around the back of the head, that's illegal. But read it as if you were reading it aloud, and I'll tell you what, naturally you will pick up on where you should be breathing, and therefore you put a comma. If a sentence is too long, and I'll talk about that in just a second, then you'll be able to see that and see whether if a sentence needs to be split into 2 or maybe even 3. Do that proofreading. It will genuinely help you a lot. Save 5 minutes at the end to do that. So let's talk about some vocabulary. This is where I want to talk a bit more about sentences. So there are 3 types of sentences I mentioned. They are simple, compound, and complex. What's important here is we need to talk about clauses. Clauses are parts of a sentence. So a simple sentence is one independent clause. For example, I passed the exam, which is subject, verb, object. I passed the exam. You can put in other words there if you want. You can put a time phrase in. I passed the exam yesterday. I passed the exam this morning. You can put in manner there if you want. I passed the exam convincingly this morning. So you can put extra stuff in there, but it's one subject, one verb, and it makes sense on its own. Those are the three criteria of an independent clause. And that is a simple sentence. Throw some in. A compound sentence is two or more independent clauses joined by conjunctions such as and or but or for or yet. Fanboys is the acronym, but I will leave you to Google fanboys on your own. Here's an example. I passed the exam. Makes sense on its own, independent clause. But Jane failed. Jane failed is an independent clause. Jane, subject, failed, verb. It's an independent clause. It works on its own. So you could have, I passed the exam. Jane failed. Two sentences, two simple sentences. You can join them with a but. Well, let's join them with a but then, for goodness sake. I passed the exam, but Jane failed. Poor old Jane. Sorry, Jane. Now, that's a compound sentence, compounded together. A complex sentence is where you have one independent clause. You always need an independent clause, and one dependent clause. Here's an easy example. Jane failed the exam because she didn't watch this video. Jane failed the exam because she didn't watch this video. A good way to get in a complex sentence is just to throw a because clause in, because that's just gonna it automatically gonna be a complex sentence. So shove it in there. Shove it in there. So you're going to be, the examiner is looking out for a range of sentences. I suggest you try and get one of each type of sentence into each paragraph. Now, your examiner will also be looking for things like signposting. Signposting, you've got to take a big sign in, put it in the, no, not that sort of signposting, different sort of signposting. Signposting can show how far through the progress of your essay you are. So, for example, to begin, in the first place, I will argue. These are opening comments. Your reader reads those and he knows what's coming. Then, perhaps for the middle section, next I will discuss. Before thinking about A, it's important to think about B. This shows that you've got a progression going on. This is this shows that there's something coming next. It's a progression. Finally, to conclude. In conclusion, these are ending statements. So you know, your reader knows that this is you're now coming into land. This is the end of the essay. But you can also have something called discourse markers. Discourse markers are things like in addition, where you're giving an extra point. Moreover, similarly. Furthermore, for example, similarly. Contrariwise, that means the opposite. Imagery. Then your examiner might be looking for devices, for example, jumped the gun there, didn't I? Imagery. Now, imagery can include things like metaphor or simile or personification or the pathetic fallacy. Pathetic fallacy is a fun one. That's where you're saying that the weather behaves in a certain way, like the wind was roaring. A metaphor, the soldier was a lion in the fight. That's where you're saying something is, you're comparing something by saying something's what it isn't. Simile would be where you're comparing something. It's obviously it's open comparison, so it has to have like or as. So the soldier was like a lion in the fight, which probably meant he had hair a bit like mine. Personification is where an inactive thing is taking the attributes of a living thing, or a human, particularly a person. So the tree beckoned me in to the forest. Speaking of the forest, there's a set of devices called Da Forest. Would you like to know about them? Oh, good. Now, I don't want you to get into the exam and not be able to see Da Forest for the trees. See what I did there? Moving on. So the Da Forest is it tells us, it describes, it's a way of remembering some devices. Here they are. Direct address. That's where you're talking to someone directly. You are a slime-filled pustule. I'm going a little bit Matilda there. Alliteration. You are a stinking slime-filled pustule. This is where things begin and end with the same letter. Stinking, slime-filled. Puking pastels from Harry Potter. This is they are alliterative. The other end, of course, is rhyme, which we're all much more familiar with. The cat sat on the mat, where the ending is the same. But alliteration is when the first sound is the same. The F of Da Forest are facts. Facts are things that can be proven. They're not necessarily something that is true. Be clear on this. Facts are things that can be proven or tested. So you can completely and utterly make stuff up in the exam. But if you are stating it as fact, it's still a Da Forest device. And obviously, if facts, being objective, are one thing, the other side of that coin are opinions, which are subjective. The truth of them is in the subject, not the object. Then, of course, we have the R, rhetorical questions. Now, what do I mean by rhetorical questions? See what I did there? Rhetorical questions. You're not expecting an answer for them. You're using them purely to engage your audience, purely for their rhetorical value. E would be emotive language. You disgusting, evil, vile individual. You didn't like me saying that to you. You had an emotional response. It was an emotive language. I'm sorry if I have offended you. Please watch the rest of the video. You might like me by the end of it. S would be statistics. Now, I think we all know that there are 3 kinds of lies in the world: lies, damn lies, and statistics. Interestingly, 90% of all statistics, including this one, are made up. I think we'll move away from that, that for a moment. So statistics are, you don't need to have done huge amounts of research to use statistics in your writing. All you really need is to make up some statistics. Remember, no one's going to test you on it. And then we end up with triplets. This is something that politicians use all the time. If they want a message to get through, they'll say it in 3 ways. They'll say 3 things. The human mind doesn't work much beyond 3 things. So politicians know this, and they put it into their speeches. They have 3 points to get across. do the same. You can use the same device. So have three things together, because those three things will stick in someone's mind. And those are the Da Forest devices. SPaG, represented here by my old friend SPaG Yeti. So SPaG stands for spelling, punctuation and grammar. For spelling, I would like you to be clear on a couple of things. Think about homophones and double letters. So homophones are words that sound the same. There, there. For example, there as in over there, T-H-E-R-E. There as in belonging to them, T-H-E-I-R. Or there as in meaning they are, T-H-E-Y apostrophe R-E. They are, they're a missive use of the apostrophe, just to give you a little bit of punctuation. There's loads of them. Here. 8. That's a really good apple. And it's so good. In fact, I think I need 8 more of them. They sound the same. They're spelt completely different. Night and night. Something that is dark and something that is dressed in armor. Double letters. Think about words like disappointment, address, Mississippi. These words have double letters in. If you know you have problems with those, I suggest you bone up on it tonight. For punctuation, think about end sentences, end sentence punctuation. That's really only full stop, exclamation mark and question mark. The most common one is a full stop. The most defined one is a question mark, only used at the end of questions. The exclamation mark is used when you're shouting at someone, "Don't do that!" Was that scary? I was a little bit scared there. And please do not use multiple exclamation marks, because multiple exclamation marks, according to Terry Pratchett, are the sure sign of a diseased mind. And I agree with Terry Pratchett on this. Apostrophes, as I've said before, have two uses: omissive and possessive. Do not use apostrophes to pluralize. If you do, I will hunt you down. No, I won't hunt you down. It's not true, but I will be very it will not impress your examiner. That is true. So omissive is words like don't, can't, where you're missing a letter out. You are omitting a letter, and so you replace it with an apostrophe. The other one is possessive, which is where you're using it to show possession of something. So, for example, this is John's pen. John apostrophe S pen. It belongs to John. Good old John. He's a nice bloke. I'll introduce you. So yeah, those are the only two uses for apostrophes. Please don't use apostrophes on verbs to when you're putting them in third person singular. Just please don't do it. It makes me upset. Talking of third person singular, that's really grammar. Let's talk about grammar, shall we? Here I've singled out two things to talk about. First one is tenses. Now, tenses in English, there are 3 time periods: past, present and future. Tell me if I'm losing you here. But there are also modes. So you could have present simple or present continuous. Present simple is for rules, present continuous is for what is happening right now. Right now I am watching, present continuous, a video. And you can also, of course, have past perfect, which is giving background information, like you were working as a waitress in a cocktail bar. And then you'd usually intersect that with a past tense. For example, when I met you. Don't you want me, baby? You can also have the perfects, and perfect can also be in simple or continuous. Perfect is where you're telling a story from a perspective. So I have been doing something, present perfect continuous. And it tells you about a present time and past events that led up to that present time. Whereas the past perfect, I had already eaten before I went to the party. You're telling the story out of order. So you're giving, I wasn't hungry at the party because I had already eaten. Something that happened before an event in the past. Also, you have things like passive and active voice, which changes the subject and object around. I made a PowerPoint. The PowerPoint was made by me. This is the same sentence in passive and active voice. Passive is where it doesn't matter who did it. It matters that the PowerPoint was made. See what happened there? Was made. Also, then you've got things like conditionals. If I fall in, I'll drown. If I won £1 million, I would buy a big steak. Jolly good steak for £1 million. Anyway, move on, Tim. Thank you. So agree. You'll also be tested on things like agreement. This will be things like subject-verb agreement. That is where you have the third person singular adding an S. Everybody show me 3 fingers. Turn it around to 1 and go S again. S. Third person singular. It's where you add an S. So I eat. My wife eats. I dance. My friend dances. Please don't ever make this with an apostrophe, or once again I will send a Yeti round to your house to stomp on you. I won't. I don't know where you live. YouTube doesn't give me that information. So use the correct tense as well. So if you're speaking in the past, keep it in the past. If you're speaking in the future, keep it in the future. I think it's about time we talked about types of questions that might come up, don't you? Good, glad we agree on that. Questions can be mapped on a kind of matrix. You have to consider tone and style based on audience and purpose. So for tone, you have a continuum from formal to informal, and for style, you have a continuum from personal to impersonal. And this will inform the type of language that you employ. And some of the examples you might get here, if it were formal and personal, it might be an email, for example, an email to the council. So it's formal, but it's personal, it's to an individual. So you would say you. However, if you wanted something that was formal but impersonal, you'd be talking about a report. If you're asked to write a report, you wouldn't ever say you or I. It's impersonal. You don't put any personal greetings at all in there. But it is formal. It's formal because it's going to an official body. Most of us are probably more comfortable with informal forms of writing, which if it were personal and informal, it might be either an email to your friends or a letter to your mum. I hope you will write letters to your mum telling her that you love her. And this, or it might be something like a web forum. a web forum, where you are responding to other people on the way on the forum, but you're responding in an informal way. Try not to say, I think Bill is a complete idiot because he shouldn't have said this and this and this. You should probably be a little bit more polite than that. Remember, you don't know who Bill is, and he might be he might really take offense at that and start crying. Okay, if it is impersonal and informal, then it might be a magazine article that you're writing. And a magazine article would be impersonal and informal. So you would use slang, particularly if you're writing for something like The Sun or something like that. You could use rhetorical devices. You can use emotive language in an article. Can't use emotive language in a report, remember. Don't do that. You're just reporting facts in a report. And if it's and it should be informal. So it's impersonal. You're not writing to your reader. You're writing for your reader. I hope that makes sense. Impersonal writing for your reader, personal writing to an individual, formal a language that you're putting on your best suit language. Informal, not quite your mates down the pub. I've seen you down the pub. I know how you talk to your mates. More informal, just fairly friendly. You can use a little bit of slang. You can use phrasal verbs. You can use abbreviations, things like that. So all that is left for me to say is good luck. You've got this. You have got this. You will go into this exam, you will sit down and you will pass it, and you will be so glad that you watched this video. Goodbye and good luck.